Good evening and welcome to this month's Creative Conversation. I hope you all stayed safe over the last month, and hopefully we're seeing the other end of this COVID situation now. So, like I say, I hope you're all staying safe and well. This month we've got a fantastic guest who has been in the industry many years and currently resides as the chief engineer at Metropolis Studios. So, it's my absolute pleasure this evening to introduce you to Paul Norris.
Hi, Jody.
Hey Paul, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. They are very well, thank you. Fantastic. Um, so as many of you are aware, we have a chat with Paul this evening, and if any of you have any questions that you'd like to bring up, or you have any questions that you want answered about techniques that Paul uses, or questions about his career, please do put them in the chat, and we'll get around to as many as we can. So, Paul, you're currently based in Metropolis, but was it always your ambition to work in the music recording industry?
Uh, I think, well, yeah, I was always in bands and stuff when I was younger, and always sort of around music. My dad was in bands, and so I was always around music, and it was one of those things where I guess I wanted to be a rock star to start with, and then when I realised that wasn't a very viable option, I decided that maybe going down the more technical route would be interesting. I think I got a Tascam Porter Studio with a little cassette machine in it, and when I was 13 or 14, and then sort of just from there, just decided that was sort of the where I wanted to pursue, to be honest.
Okay, so you say from about 13, 14, that was with a tape machine, and I'm sure you spent many a fun afternoon with a pencil in between the cassette, winding it all back in again, and
Yeah.
working out how to resolve from chewed up tape. Um, but how did you go from there to sort of working in a professional studio? Did you get an apprenticeship, or were you at university, or what was your
So
route path?
so yeah, I did a degree at Hull University in creative music technology, and then from there, basically just the sort of classic send out CVs to every studio and just see what happens. And I did 3 months in a studio in Leeds called Soundworks. Um, and then from there, I moved on. I literally the day I was leaving Leeds, actually, to come back to my parents' house at Essex, I got an email from Sam Wheat, who was the chief engineer at Metropolis at the time, asking if I wanted to come in and interview to be a runner. So I did that, and then yeah, started in January, I think, the next year. So started there as a runner, and then sort of just never left.
So, what in the early days, what did your sort of day to day consist of?
The running sort of side of things is it's quite varied, and it's all I mean, it's the classic sort of stuff: getting people's food, making the tea, sweeping the steps, just sort of being around and trying to absorb as much knowledge as possible, but obviously not getting in anyone's way, and then just being as helpful as possible. I think, to be honest, you don't need the audio knowledge is something you can learn in the studio like Metropolis, something you can pick up as you're there. It's more about making yourself valuable in that situation, I suppose. So it's just about being ready to go and pick up someone's Nando's, or go and find some random pasta dish that someone really has to have that at that point, and go from there.
So, when you started in Metropolis, you mentioned the previous chief engineer there. Did anyone in particular take you under their wing?
Um, and Metropolis is quite it's a very close knit team, so there's not a lot of us in the studios department. I think there's 6 of us now, and that's probably more than there were when I started, to be honest. And so Sam was sort of the chief engineer. I don't think there was anyone else really engineering that much then, but then the other assistants, so Zav Stevenson, who's over in LA now. I think he's at Sphere in LA. And Liam Nolan, who's still at Metropolis, he was there as an assistant. I think he just started assisting. So like learning from those guys basically how to be an assistant more than how to be an engineer, And then when Zav started engineering, he was sort of took me under his wing, I suppose, and showed me a lot of stuff when he was engineering, and dropped me in at engineering when he thought I was at that point, to give me a more hands-on experience and that kind of thing.
So what was what was the turning point for you from going from runner to assistant to actually finding your feet as an engineer? And what was sort of the moment you went, actually, I've made it, I've broken into the next level here, I'm actually running this session?
Uh, I can't think of one specific moment. It happened sort of, as horrible it is to say, it happened organically.
Right.
But I was running for probably nearly a year. It wasn't full time. It was sort of 2-3 days a week. I think probably did sort of 10, 11 months like that. And I'd helped out. They just started doing all the live to vinyl sessions when they first started doing them, there was for a TV show on Channel 4. And the band would turn up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, the band wouldn't, but the equipment would turn up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So we'd get the studio ready and we'd be cutting a vinyl by one in the afternoon. So that was sort of where I got put on sessions more as an assistant. At first, it was just to run around and get stuff, and then by the end of that sort of series, I was the assistant. And then from there, it was more just when there was an opportunity to do a session. And I think towards the end of that year, we had a big tracking session come in for an album that never actually came out, but Metropolis, we don't have Pro Tools operators and assistants. They're not a separate role. Engineers tend to run Pro Tools on most of the sessions. So the producer and the engineer on that session didn't want to run Pro Tools. So Liam was the assistant, but he was also Pro Tools op, which meant he couldn't do it. So I got put on that session as well. And then actually Liam got ill halfway through that session. I ended up just being the assistant on that session. And I guess that's a turning point to being an assistant. And then as an engineer, it was more just occasionally clients turning up without an engineer, so I happened to do it, and learning on the job that way, and then eventually just sort of being needed for sessions and then going from there, I suppose.
So that was because obviously we have people watching from all over the planet. For those that don't know, can you tell us a bit more about? Because I watched it, and it was amazing to watch. And actually, I think I was there for one of the actual sessions. But the live to vinyl. Can you tell us a bit more about that and what the thinking was behind that, and what the idea behind the program was?
Yeah, so we're still doing them now. Actually, they still do them. And I think we've been live streaming them for the last 2 years, obviously, but they now have a small group. I think it's about 50 people can come in and watch. But the basic idea is that it goes back to the origins, I suppose, of recording music, where it's a group of people playing in a room, and then it gets cut straight onto a lacquer. So the band will come in and set up. Now we're a bit lucky; we sometimes even get a day to set everything up. So band will come in, we'll get set up, and they'll basically just run through the songs a few times, because you get one or two songs per side depending on how you do it. And so I'll set it up as a recording session and then basically just mix it on the desk as we go. And there's literally just 2 cables that run up from Studio A, which is at the very bottom of Metropolis, to the mastering room at the very top, and then from there they cut it onto the vinyl. So it's a sort of nerve-wracking process, I suppose. But yeah, the idea is that it captures things in the studio in a way that almost no one is doing anymore, because there's no edits, there's no drop-ins, no overdubs. So it's very rare that anything's done like that, especially in the sort of rock and pop world of music.
So how would you say that not only yourself but Metropolis has evolved over the years? Because obviously Prism, we've been working with Metropolis since the early 90s, but I've known you for a number of years now, and we've all evolved. And I think Metropolis has evolved. So, you know, how it's kind of a double part question. How would you say Metropolis has evolved to encompass all of these different avenues that from a business perspective? And how would you say your role's evolved in the business?
I suppose with Metropolis, I've only been at Metropolis in my time. It's been digital from pretty much the get-go. I've done very few tape sessions, but I think Metropolis is finding that place between being a big studio, which isn't necessary for every project, and working out what we can do to stay relevant in a way. Because if you're coming in to record a vocal, you need to justify why you've hired a big studio to record a vocal. And so part of that evolution is, I think, for Metropolis is, and I think it's quite an American thing, is making it as much like a hotel as it is a studio. And it's about looking after clients and making sure that they're comfortable, because the other side of it has to just happen. You have to be very quick on Pro Tools or whatever DAW you're using, just to make sure that things just happen and that clients are looked after in that sense. But it's also going out and making sure they've got the food they want and making sure that they're comfortable, because otherwise they've got no reason to come to the studio. There's so many artists now who could just do it at home if they're recording vocals. It's not out of the realms of reality for an artist to just sit at home with a Pro Tools rig or Logic on a laptop and record their own vocals. So you've got to give them a reason to come in. That's part of it. And then the other side of it is exploring those things like the live to vinyl, things that you can't ever do at home. So it is the live to vinyl stuff. The other live streaming events, we do a lot of live shows and in the studios as well. Just things that sort of can bring people in that they can't do elsewhere. And I guess the latest part of that is Atmos as well. So we've just built, it's been about a year now. We've had an Atmos room, which I believe is the highest resolution for a music room in Atmos, certainly in London. And so it's just trying to keep up with that side of things. And it's the same, I suppose, technology is the other thing. Got to keep up with, keep Pro Tools up to date, keep converters up to date, keep the microphones ready. You know, it's just that sort of thing. And I suppose in terms of my evolution, I've just been at Metropolis at the time that's happened, to be honest. I think the recording business has been moving forward like that for my entire career. I've been at Metropolis for 12 years, and I can remember when I started, it was people were worried about the bedroom producer revolution, and it's just finding a space for somewhere like Metropolis within that, because you're never going to take that away from people. There's too many. It's too easy to get a laptop and make music now, for people to not want to do that. And it's just finding our space within that, I suppose.
So do you think, you know, and I know you and I have touched on this before when I've been down, we've had a coffee, but, you know, do you think the way the rooms at Metropolis in particular are being utilized in a different way? Because there was a time many moons ago where rooms would be blocked, but like, you know, because Metropolis seems always to be busy. Whenever I've been there, it's always been busy, but it's not like they get blocked booked now. So do you think the way the rooms have evolved and the way people utilize them has changed?
Yeah, I think there's certainly fewer block bookings. Like two weeks is not unheard of, but people booking in for 6 weeks to come make an album doesn't happen as much at Metropolis anymore. I think that might be partly to do with where our client base is in terms of pop rather than a lot of rock stuff. And obviously, I don't know, we'd love to do more rock stuff. It's just people sort of tend to go to the same places. So, but yeah, we tend to do shorter sessions, and I suppose part of that is just being able to accommodate people quickly. But I think the way Metropolis was designed, I don't know if it was there's a lot of the control rooms are very big compared to a lot of studios. So if you go to a lot of studios, the control rooms are very much, this is the engineer and the producer space. musicians, you're out there, you go and play, and we'll talk to you over this microphone. There's not a huge amount of space, but we're very lucky to have big control rooms, which means when people are working, especially when people are working on laptops and in the digital world, there's no reason for someone to be the other side of the glass. We'll quite often record vocals with someone in the control room because it's just how people want to work, and they're used to. If you're a rapper and you first ever recordings you made were in your mate's bedroom looking over his shoulder, that's what you want to continue doing. You just want to do it in a bigger, posher environment, because it's very uncomfortable for someone who's used to recording in a bedroom to suddenly go, right, go and stand in this vocal booth and we'll talk you through the glass, and you won't always be able to hear everyone because they'll forget to press the talkback button. So I think the rooms at Metropolis make that quite an easy thing to do, and it's being able to move from Studio A. If you're recording, you might want to just record piano for the day when you're making an album upstairs, so you can just come downstairs and book Studio A for half the day, and having those sort of different size rooms helps as well.
So do you think that's one of the things about Metropolis? And like you say, you know, coming on back to something you said a few minutes ago, is that it Metropolis gives you sort of that relaxed, almost homely feel. I don't mean that kind of in a twee way, but you know, you feel relaxed when you walk in there. You feel relaxed when you go into the control room. It's not like this clinical space. And you know, again, I've been down there when we've walked in. You know, we've been showing people around, and you know, you've walked in, you've gone, hang on a minute, there's a microphone stood in the middle of the control room, and you know, it fits what you said. Is it because the rooms are designed almost that way that actually you can record vocals in there because they have a great sound in the control rooms anyway?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. It's just about being able to make people as comfortable as possible, and I don't know whether the rooms were designed with people recording vocals in them in mind, or whether it's just luck. But I think having those spaces, it helps with that, just being able to make people comfortable, and however they want to do it, we have to accommodate it, and that's part of being a studio. I think it's not for me to tell someone how to record their vocals. It's for me to accommodate how they want to record their vocals.
So obviously, you know, you touched on that there's the 4 studios, and you know, I've had the pleasure of being in all of them. But if you had to, I don't know, this is going to be a really tough one for you, but if you had to say which one of the rooms is your favorite, which one would you say it is and why?
Yeah, I'd say Studio B is my favorite.
Right.
I just think it's a great sounding control room. Obviously, Chenzo Townsend was in there for a couple of years mixing, and so like it's a great control room. It's not just Studio B, for people watching, I guess it's probably best. It's our second biggest room. It's got a big tracking space. But yeah, the control room sounds great, and then the control room also opens up into the lounge, and it just makes it quite a homely space. I think it feels quite private, and depending on the artist and the client and how they want it to be, you can shut yourself off completely from the rest of the building, or you can have doors open and make it quite a sort of open space, and it's got privacy. But yeah, I think I just like sitting in there, to be honest, and I like the desk. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
It's the G series in there. It's my favorite desk.
So again, for people that have never been to Metropolis or haven't seen, you know, studio shots, can you tell us what's in Studio B?
So yeah, it's an SSL G series in there, 56 channels, I think. Yeah, 56 channels. Pro Tools, HDX, Prism ADA8s. The load of hardware. The hardware, sort of the outboard stuff, sort of the same across all 4 rooms. We've got 1176, Tube Tech, GML EQs, Manley EQs, Prism EQs, all the sort of standard stuff, and that's sort of across all 4 rooms. And then in terms of tracking space, it's quite a big live room, big enough to do a full band easily, and the Yamaha grand piano in there. And then we've got sort of cupboards full of other outboard mic pre's and all the stuff people want.
Cool. Fantastic. So You've, we've all had a difficult couple of years. How has Metropolis coped over the last couple of years with the whole COVID situation? Were you closed down? Did you have like I know you were really you guys are really hot on taking the precautions. In fact I don't think have seen as many precautions that I ever as I did when I came down during the COVID period. But how has it affected you guys?
I like for everyone, it was tough. Like there wasn't. I mean, I went from having. I think I had. We said there's not many bot bookings, but I did actually have about 6 weeks of recording an album booked in, and then overnight it disappeared. So it was tough with that. A lot of the work disappeared, especially when lockdown happened. And we were able to keep going. We were able to accommodate. There were a few sessions with sort of where it was just going to be an artist and a producer. And so the assistant would put everything they needed in the room and they'd be outside the room. And then the engineer would be in the control room and the artist would be in the live room. And we were able to work like that, but there wasn't a huge amount of stuff going on. But we're very lucky to have a great mastering department as well, and they've been busier than ever. And I think without that, we would have been in real trouble because they just so busy for the entire thing. And then as we've progressed through COVID, I suppose lots of remote sessions, lots of stuff on Zoom and audio movers and all those things. And working out ways of making that work, and people being all over the world because they can't. So many of our clients are American and American producers working with UK artists. So there's a lot of that Zoom stuff we had to do, and then we got into doing a lot of live streaming sessions as well. So we live streaming the live to vinyl sessions, and lots of like a little series of just other people coming and doing shows and accommodating other people doing stuff. I even did a live stream of a band who were doing they're doing an online conference, like team building conference. So the band were doing an online performance for an online conference for people in every continent or something from Studio A. So just being able to find those avenues and ways of keep working, to be honest, I suppose.
And has that has it in its own way that been positive because it's actually identified new opportunities and ways of working, or has it completely transitioned back to the way it was?
No, I think there's still a lot of stuff that happens. Stuff happens remotely that probably should have been happening remotely in the first place. You can things like audio movers when people want to do mix changes. There's no need for an email to go backwards and forwards that used to happen, or for someone to have to come down and you're trying to find a time that suits everyone's schedule. With audio movers, someone can be, I mean, you could be on a train with a pair of headphones. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can listen and do that. As long as it's sort of minor tweaks, then that's not a problem. So there's more of that sort of stuff, more things where people are using Zoom and stuff. Yeah, I think there's a few things, but it's nice to have people in the studios again. It's nice to work with humans and not talk to a screen and not deal with latency.
Yeah. So with that in mind, is there anybody that you can tell us you've been working with recently? Any exciting projects that have really sort of grabbed your attention?
It's been such a weird, bitty year for me personally. It's just there's nothing that springs to mind. I've done lots of different little bits, but I know sort of coming out of Metropolis, there's a Liam worked on Bakar's album that just came out recently, which is a really interesting thing, and a lot of that happened over lockdown. And they did all of that in Studio E, well, mostly in Studio E, and it wasn't just recording vocals. I think actually when you came down last, you already saw the setup. They had a whole drum kit in the control room in Studio E.
Yeah.
And everything was in one space, and it's a really cool, interesting album, and they just sort of showed how people can utilize the space. And I think they were working with people from all over as well, so they're using all the Zoom stuff, and that's a really cool project that's been done recently at Metropolis. And to be honest, everything else hasn't come out yet. There's
Right.
so much has been recorded in the last 2 years. I think there's a bit of a backlog as to what's going to come out. So
Yeah, so hopefully we're in for an influx, this summer and up to Christmas.
yeah,
Gosh, I can't believe I even said that word. We're only in March and I'm saying about Christmas
yeah.
already.
I haven't done any Christmas stuff yet, but it feels like it's coming soon.
Coming soon, yeah. So, as the chief engineer at Metropolis now, well, how does your day to day pan out? What's your roles on a day to day basis?
Um, it's quite varied. So I suppose the engineering side of things is the same as any other engineer at Metropolis. It's nothing different from whatever we happen to be recording or mixing, then that's what I'm doing in that day. But then sort of the chief engineer bit outside of that is a lot of making sure assistants are looked after and know what they're doing, and if they need help with anything, and trying to, I guess, in a way, trying to teach them when they get time. They're all the busiest people, but just trying to look after them, make sure that equipment is working, because obviously vintage stuff has a habit of breaking at the worst time. So making sure that that's looking after. So sort of talking, we've got a great tech team, and making sure that working with them to make sure everything's running. And on top of that, the other part of it is trying to buy new things and stay on top of moving technology, as well as buying things clients want. Instruments, for example, is such a change in, I suppose, fashion is what instruments people want. It's just trying to keep up with it and make sure that we've got those things available to our clients.
So how do you? It's an interesting question to come up. Is that, in my mind, Metropolis has always tried to stay at the forefront of technology, and you've really sort of pushed the boundaries to make it attract, not only for the facility, it's an attractive facility, but also because of the level of technology that you've always had, because you've always been able to offer the most recent thing with the way technology changes these days, and it seems to be ever increasing in speed. How do you keep up with
that? With difficulty.
Yeah.
It's very hard to keep up with the latest technology, but I think our clients are so switched on. Our clients are all on the cusp of these things. They've all always looking at what can we do next? How can we push ourselves? And when you've got producers or musicians coming in saying, "Oh, have you seen this?" then you sort of get turned on to those things, and it's just trying to keep on top of them. Luckily, it's a lot of software stuff. It tends to be that it's keeping on top of, and so demoing plugins and seeing, do we need to buy this? Is this something we need to have, or is this just something that will go away? So it's difficult to stay on top of it all, but I guess just talking to people and seeing what's happening, I suppose.
Okay. And I'm sure that must be a bit mind-bending for yourself, because you're keeping on top of the technology. You've got all these projects, you've got these people you've got to manage. What inspires you and makes you want to keep doing what you're currently doing?
The money. No, it's,
at least you're honest.
No, it's I just love being around music as much as anything else. And I mean, I'm at my dad's at the moment in New York. I came up from London on the train yesterday, and I saw someone preparing a presentation on the train, and I thought, thank God I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
I just get to work. I get to work on music, and it's such a variety of stuff I get to do at Metropolis. It's not. I mean, I do a lot of pop vocals, but at the same time, I might do 3 days with Little Mix and then record an orchestra the next day. So it's nice. It's just great to have that variety, and I just don't think I get that in many places, and that's what keeps me going. To be honest, it's just that I never know what's going to happen, never know what we're going to be recording, and it's just, I don't know, I just really like music.
See, I can tell that, you know, with what's in the background with your dad's music collection that I can
Yeah.
see there, you know, you probably never got what a lot of us got, which was so. This music thing you're working in. When are you going to give that up and get a proper job? You know.
Yeah, no, I was incredibly lucky when I was running at Metropolis. My parents were living in Essex at the time, so I was able to live rent free for that time when I was doing the running stuff. And I mean, it would commute across London, but not having to pay rent in London at the same time made that incredibly much easier than it would have been. And I've had incredible support with doing that.
Yeah, fantastic. We've got a quick question at 7:27 from the B-side project. What advice would you give Paul for a career progression in studio engineering?
Um, I, it's difficult without knowing sort of where someone's at, I suppose. But my main advice is do it because you want to do it. Don't do it for money. Don't do it for fame. Do it because doing, you love being a recording engineer. Um, I mean, a lot of people's advice would be to find a niche, but I haven't managed to do that. And I mean, I won a Grammy for Rihanna's album, and I've been nominated this year for an album with Andrew Lloyd Webber. So that's sort of the variety of people. And I think just keep doing what you love doing, and just keep up with technology, keep learning. There's never a time to stop learning. I think if you stop wanting to learn about what you're doing, then you may as well give up, because you sort of, that's for me that's part of it.
Cool. Good advice. Good, very good advice. So, you know, to that end, you know, we've spoken a bit about people that are sort of taking you under their wing and what you're doing at Metropolis. So what has inspired you the most over your career so far? And you know, what has been the most influential thing in your career so far?
Um, I suppose hard to think of anything specifically influential, but like I say, it's just working with the variety of people, and working with people who love what they're doing, and have, like, working with producers and artists who've got a vision. It's something the reason I was never successful in band is because I just wanted to go and play music. I had no idea where I was going with it, and I wasn't particularly good at it. Um, but just seeing people who've got that vision and being able to help them, I suppose, realize that vision. I suppose that's, as an engineer, that's more what I see my role as doing. And there's space for creativity, but my role is just being able to help some of the best musicians and producers in the world make music.
Cool. So you've obviously worked with some influential acts. You've got Grammy awards, Grammy nominations. Um, in your opinion, what do you think makes a great song?
Oh, a great song. And that's a broad question.
Yeah, that's why I ask it. It's for you to take wherever you want.
I think for me, it's about the writing of the song. I think everything else. I mean, as an engineer, it might not be the best answer to be giving, but if you don't write a good song, the rest of it is irrelevant. And that's writing it as the lyrics and the melody and the chords and all that stuff, but then all the production elements, I suppose. But if you don't start with a good song, you're never gonna get a good song. Doesn't matter how good the mix is, and it doesn't matter how good the production is. It's about having that song. And I suppose for me, that that is about something that's has a purpose. It doesn't have to be a believable story of love, but if you're writing a pop song, then the purpose of that song has to be that it's catchy and people want to hear it, and you want to, and it just depends, I suppose, on the genre of song, but it's always comes back to the writing, and writing it because you believe that's the best song for what you're trying to achieve. Um, I think if you go out and you're in a rock band and you go, well, those pop musicians are really, they're selling out the O2. Let's write a pop song. If you do it because it's chasing success, you'll never write a good song.
Brilliant answer. Brilliant answer. I know I'll put you on the spot there, but that's a great answer. But I think the thing is, your role as an engineer, you again, to reiterate, you've worked with some major artists, and is there any advice you can offer when working with these types of people and individuals? They're demanding the best from the equipment that you're driving, but they're demanding the best from you as an individual, and both of them, like you make way more than myself, but we've both met famous people and successful artists, and you get different types of characters. So you've got the people that completely control the session and they drive it and they know exactly what they want, and then you've got those other people that are, to be honest, a little bit insular, and so they're very creative and extremely talented, but they don't drive that session. So you've got to kind of take the lead on that. How do you deal with those situations, and how do what advice can you give to anybody about controlling that narrative in the control room?
I think obviously I find the people who are very much in control, I find that that's generally a lot easier to know what's happening, and you've just got to be there as a sponge in a way and just soak up what's happening and make sure that you're there. If someone picked up an acoustic guitar at the back of the control room, is noodling along while someone else is doing the tambourine or something, yeah, obviously you've got to concentrate on recording the tambourine because that's the here and now. But at the same time, it's making sure that you're ready to record the guitar, because that person's going to want to go and record the guitar. And it's about guiding the session, but just letting it happen, but just being ready for every eventuality like that. And I think as an assistant, actually, the best assistants, and what I always try to do as an assistant, is be one step ahead of what's happening in the room. So the same thing, if you see someone pick up an acoustic guitar, or you hear someone say, "Oh, this needs acoustic guitar," and go and find the acoustic guitar and then find some mics that might be the right choice, and just be ready for that. Obviously, with people that are a little bit more insular, that's a lot harder to do. It's a lot harder to stay on top of that, especially if there's someone who's very creative and might suddenly go, "Now I'm going to record acoustic guitar," and you've got no way of knowing. And it's a case of just being as quick as possible and being ready for all the situations that could happen. And yeah, I guess there's a little bit of guiding, and that's sort of, I'm lucky to work in a world where there's a producer most of the time that can guide that process if it's not happening organically. But sometimes you just have to put your big producer hat on and just say, "Why don't we do this?" And at least make some suggestions that, if they're appropriate. But yeah, I guess just being on the ball and ready to do whatever someone wants to do.
So do you have, when you're approaching a session, obviously there's sometimes there's difficult discussions to be having, and especially when an artist has a very, very clear vision, and their vision of getting to the end outcome, and the way that you're thinking, well, actually we can get there not only a lot simpler, but a lot more efficiently doing it this way. How do you approach those kind of conversations and difficult approaches? Because I can imagine it's not an easy discussion or an easy thing to do.
I guess it's about judging the situation and judging the character of the person who's saying it. Sometimes you're with an artist and a producer who might be very comfortable with just saying, "Why don't we do it this way?" But sometimes it's quicker just to do it the artist way, and
Right.
and do it the long way. And if it doesn't work, go, "Oh, we could try this," and just let them do what they want first. Because creative people, I find, are very much, once they get a thought in their head, we need to do it. And if someone's decided they need to do hand claps one at a time and record it 1,000 times, then it's sometimes quicker to do that than say, "Why don't we get 10 people to go in there and do the hand claps?"
Yeah.
sometimes it's quicker to just let them do it their way, and if it doesn't work or it's not working, then make that suggestion.
Right. Sure. So when you're working with an artist, in those situations, and you've come into the session from afresh, do you have, because I know different people have different approaches to the working, but do you have a systematic approach to starting the session? Do you always start in a certain area, or do you just go with what the vibe of the room's doing?
Yeah, whatever the clients want to do, they're in charge. Yeah, it's very much however they want to work, and you get to know how people work. But I think that's part of, I'd say, the skill of being able to be very quick on Pro Tools is probably the most important part of doing that. So you can just quickly react to what people want to do. Obviously that goes for whatever DAW you're using, but for me, it's Pro Tools is what we're using all the time, and just being able to accommodate what people want quickly. But for me, I have no specific starting place to anything. I've got like a template for vocals, or I'll make one before the artist comes in if it's just a vocal session, and make sure I've got 100 tracks ready to record, because I've no idea how many harmonies they're going to want to do, and I don't want them standing in the booth waiting while I'm making more tracks. So yeah, just trying to be quick, I suppose.
Cool. So we've got, obviously, before we came on this call today, we were discussing that we have a diverse range of people that normally attend these creative conversations, and there's going to be people that are professionals and they work in the industry and they just wanted to see, interesting bits and pieces about your career so far. But obviously, we have some people who've just started out creating music. In your mind, what would be, if there's the question, what they need to get started, what would be the first pieces of kit that would be your go-tos? And also, what were the first pieces of kit? You obviously mentioned the Tascam unit that you had, but what would be your first piece of kit to go to nowadays?
It's going to vary depending on what you're doing, but I think the thing you most need is a reliable computer. It doesn't matter what kind of music you're doing, unless you're going down a very niche road and you want to be a guy that works with a tape machine, and then in that case you need a good tape machine. But the computer for me is the most important thing. If it's not stable, if it can't keep up with the session, or it keeps crashing, then that's always gonna be a big stopping point. I think for me that's the first thing, and then monitoring, because if you don't know what you're listening to, then how can you do it? And by monitoring, I don't just mean the speakers, I mean the space you're working in, or if you're using headphones, whatever it is, and it's getting to know those things, I suppose.
Right. Okay. And sort of going on the complete flip side of that, that's getting started. But if you, I know what you said to me when we were last down at Metropolis, but what would be your go-to bits of kit for most projects? It's like, right, I have to have this and I have to have that, and these are my go-to bits of kit.
I'm trying to think what I said to you last time now. It'll be different this time.
Yeah, probably. It wouldn't surprise me. It'll be completely different to what I think it is. Yeah.
I mean, it depends what we're recording, I suppose. But I mean, aside from the computer and Pro Tools, because that's what I use, because I tried learning Logic and I couldn't do it. But besides that, I suppose for a vocal session, a good microphone. It's going to depend on the artist, but tend to use the C12 a lot or C800 a lot. Neve 1073, TubeTech CL1B or CL1A compressor. I mean, that's sort of my go-to starting place, but it depends on what it is we're doing, I suppose. What did I tell you last time?
I'm going to keep that a secret. I'll tell you after the call.
It wasn't the same then.
Yeah. So obviously your career is old over the years. Do your professional needs and wants as a creative in this industry change, and what you expect from your commitment equipment changes?
Um, and I think when I started at Metropolis, could, Pro Tools and computers have been used in studios for a long time, but the expectation of what we need computers to do has greatly come on, and how quick people expect computers to be. I think that's probably the biggest thing in that sense. Um, just I think there's a lot of technology, because technology is moving so quickly with Atmos and things like that. And whatever happens in the digital world, having things that you aren't stuck with them, you can upgrade them, you can make them work in a new workflow. Having things like that, I think, is going to be a real push for things. And I think clients expect it, because someone comes in and says, "Oh, I need to do this today," and you go, "Oh, we can't do that anymore because our equipment doesn't do that, and we haven't got the new stuff yet." And it makes sense to have something you can build upon and move forward with in that way.
Okay. So again, last time we sat down and had a chat, we were talking about the way, obviously you've mentioned about the way you've evolved and your clients have evolved, um, and about how people were saying, well, actually, I don't want to work this way anymore. I want to work that way. Have you found that there's a distinct split between working in the box and out of the box now, or are people do people still favor one way over the other when working at Metropolis, or do they come to Metropolis in certain instances and just want to have the space and the fantastic monitoring? How does it work now?
It's so varied, but I think the majority of people are happy working in the box to an extent. Um, so when I'm mixing, I mix pretty much exclusively in the box now, just because I don't have the time to be going back and recalling an entire desk, and clients don't want to pay me to recall the entire desk to turn the hi-hat up. So in mixing, certainly all in the box, and I'd say the recording side of things, obviously we're still using the desks. If you've got a drum kit set up, you're still going to need 16 mic pre's or whatever. You're still going to need all that stuff. If you're recording a big band session, you're going to need all that stuff set up. But there is more of a go-to now that even with something big like that, you'll record in a sort of in the analog way and on a large but you might just return everything as a mix in Pro Tools up 2 channels, or as stems on the desk, because it means you can come back to that project. If you're working on an album with a band, you don't want to have to recall the desk every time you want to do an overdub. So I think there's a lot more of stuff being done sort of in the box and keeping things in the box.
So obviously, you like you say, you worked a lot in the box. I know you obviously work on the consoles at Metropolis, but in your mind, when you listen to mixes, what classifies in your mind a good mix and a good master? And do you have any Paul Norris reference tracks that you can steer people towards? That is, that's absolutely amazing. That's what I always listen to as a reference track.
I tend to steer away from reference tracks, if I'm honest.
Okay.
Unless it's something that the client or whatever has said, I like this.
Yeah.
I tend not to try and listen in that way specifically. I think it's very specific to a song. I think as an engineer, it's about serving the song, not it's not to be to my taste, and it always will be my taste to an extent if it's a mix, but it's more about what emotions are they trying to get across? What are they trying to make people feel with this song? Listening to their rough mix or their reference mix and saying, what what is good about this? What is it that they're trying to convey from this? And just being able to take that to the next level. I mean, in terms of great mixes, there's so many. I guess recent stuff, the Silk Sonic album is amazing. I think Serban Grenadier did that, and I like a lot of his mixes. I think he does what he does, but it's, to me, that was a surprising one to come from him, to be honest, because it didn't sound like it sort of proved that he wasn't just like, here's my template, because it's quite a different sounding to a lot of the stuff he does, but I think they're great mixes. And they just keep it's such a fun album and I think that's the emotion that he's managed to convey with the mixes, and obviously it goes back to production and everything else as well. But yeah, for me, it's about serving the song, and that's the key.
Okay. So I'm just going to remind everyone who's watching, we've got about 10 minutes left this evening. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the comments field in the chat, so that we can get your questions over to Paul. It's interesting you talk about templates, because, you know, different people work in different ways, as we know. And, you know, some people like to work from a template, and you do get a very, well, in my opinion, and this is just me talking, but, you know, you get a very formulaic sound. You know, it's always structured in a certain way, and you go, yeah, okay, that's this producer or that engineer or whoever it may be. And you've already mentioned that, you know, you address the song and you do whatever complements the song. But do you think there's anything that's distinctive about a Paul Norris mix?
I mean, when I talk about templates, I have a mix bus template. But for me, that's sort of about, and I'm not trying to emulate the analog world, but I know it's a good starting place. It's almost like that's the sound of my console in a way. But I don't think there's anything, I don't aim to do anything specific that makes it sound like me. I'm sure my mixes all do have characteristics that make it sound, because it's my taste in things. And the drums will probably be too loud for some people, but I guess that comes down to taste. But at the same time, yeah, for me, if it's just about, yeah, serving the song and serving the vision of the artist and the producer, and trying to get that across, because there's no point in me making it sound how I think it should sound, because I'm probably only going to spend a day and a half mixing it, and they've spent years possibly writing and perfecting this song. It's not really up to me to then go, no, this is how it should be.
So here's a difficult one for you. But because obviously you've worked with some, again, great artists, but is there any artist that you would like to work with or mix that you have not yet had the opportunity of working with?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have had the opportunity to work with so many great people. It's hard to think. There are definitely people. My dad's a huge Beach Boys fan. Brian Wilson is someone I'd love to just watch work as much as anything else, because of the way he structures songs, and just being able to do that. So yes, someone like that, Quincy Jones, just those sort of some of those great old school producers, and just watching the way they run a session and keep everything, and just be able to work in that way, I think.
And obviously there's a lot of people on this evening who would be looking at yourself going, you know, I want to do what Paul's doing, you know, I want to be Paul, you know, and that's the thing, is, like you say, you know, once you're pushing the boundaries, you're always aspiring to either doing something that somebody else has done, well, not what they've done, but, you know, aspiring to achieve the greatness or the success they've achieved, or being able to have the opportunity to work with them. So, you know, what are a few key lessons that you've learned over the years about, you know, engineering, collaborating, that others can aspire to and they could take advice from?
And it sort of touches back to a lot of what I've been saying, and it's being there to serve the song or the songs and sort of help the artist's vision, and all that I think comes back to basically to communication, being able to communicate with people, especially people who might not necessarily know the technical way of word for doing something, but being able to sort of understand what someone means when they say they want something sound crispy, because they probably don't mean they want it distorted. They might do, but a lot of people want crisp vocals, and that it's working out what they mean by that. And so I'd say communication is probably the key thing, being able to communicate with people, more than anything else. So, and obviously the majority of that is listening, which is the main bit of the job, and preparation, just being prepared for whatever you need to be able to do. But in a recording sense, I think that makes the world of difference. Being prepared for a session, you don't want to be turning up not knowing what's happening or what might happen. And for me the biggest thing. In a technical sense, I think everything in the technical world you sort of learn as you go along, and you just sort of always be willing to learn from everyone you're working with, and then that's it really for me.
Okay. And again, I'm just jumping back to something that you said earlier. Considering your workflow, do you think it's important when you're recording an artist, whether it's an acoustic instrument or a vocal or whatever it might be, to capture the performance in its entirety by having a neutral, transparent, and accurate equipment, and then having the choice to adapt it in the mix? Do you think it's important to capture it in its entirety, but in its most neutral, transparent form? Because you mentioned earlier about getting the computer right and getting your monitoring right, and those are things that you would buy, if you're starting out, because then you become accustomed to what they sound like. But then, going on to sort of the interfacing or the conversion side of it, if you're working in a digital domain, do you think it's better to capture it, and then adapt it in the mix?
I've been blessed to have worked at Metropolis for pretty much my whole career, so I've only ever really worked with Prism converters, other than the occasional M box, which, and I think at the conversion stage, yes, it makes complete sense for it to be transparent and sound like it does before it goes into the computer. Right. Whether that has to be completely clean, it depends on what you're recording. You might want to distort a preamp or something, but you need something is going to capture what you're doing. I think in terms of interface and conversion, I think that is really important to have. You don't want to spend £5,000 on a vocal chain and then plug it into £100 interface. It doesn't make sense, because you're going to lose what you're paying the money for. So I think, it's definitely important you don't want converters coloring things, unless there's something specific, maybe using the soft clip or something. But generally, it's about capturing what you're doing and making it sound as natural as possible, if that's what you're going for.
Right. Okay. And is there anything you're currently working on that you can tell us about?
Not really. No, I've been
fair
doing
enough.
a few things.
That's fine.
I've got a few things lined up, but I've had a bit of time off recently, so yeah.
Right. No worries. And what can we expect from you in the rest of 2022?
Lots of stuff, but everything at Metropolis. I think one of the things about Metropolis goes back to what we were saying earlier about block bookings and stuff. So many last minute projects. So I haven't got a diary full to the end of the year. It can change. I'm looking to do more mixing and less recording so I can see my daughter more. But other than that, that's it. Sort of, just whatever the world throws at me.
Okay. And one final question before we finish this evening. Where do you want to take your career going forward? Where do you see yourself going from here?
As I say, moving more into mixing, and doing that probably more full time than being involved in the recording. I love recording, but it's not particularly sociable hours, and yeah, and I really love mixing. I'm just really enjoying mixing at the moment, so I'm just sort of looking to go more down that route, and then obviously just trying to help Metropolis stay on top of everything that's going on and keep current.
Fantastic. Well, do you know what, Paul? It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you get to spend some more time with your daughter, and I hope your mum and dad are all right. We will hopefully catch up again soon. Thanks ever so much,
Great.
Paul, and thanks for your
Really.
time this evening. And wherever you are watching from, thanks for your time, and all stay safe. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thanks, really.